Okay, welcome to the AWP University webinar series. This is the first in a long line of every third Wednesday that we'll be hosting these webinar series with multiple moguls from the industry, people that have made a difference, individuals that are notable within the AWP community, and they'll be speaking about what they're up to, as well as assisting us with some teaching moments in all of these webinars. So I thank you all for joining us. The attendance and the registration for this webinar has been outstanding, and we're very proud to have such an active and wonderful community. So today's webinar, we are going to be talking path of construction. We have guest Mr. Eric Crivella, who I'll be introducing formally here shortly. Till then, I'll introduce myself. Those of you that don't know me, my name is Robin Mikaelsson. I am the president of the AWP University. I will be your host today, and I will help Eric with questions towards the end of the presentation. And again, I thank you for coming. As the president of the university, we are obviously a training organization for AWP. My background isn't exactly that. I've been helping to develop and train people for over 20 years. In AWP since its inception and assisting in the development of AWP now going on several decades, both with COA and very proud to say CII. So without further ado, let's move forward to a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to cover a few things. We are going to be using a tool here that I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. It's called Slido. Through Slido, we are going to be logging questions. We have a potential audience of several hundred people here today. We're already over 200. We've got 700 registered. So let's log our questions so that we can have the best experience throughout the entirety of the presentations. Please feel free to come into Slido, use this link, and log your questions. We will go through the questions in the last section of the webinar. Eric and I will be having a discussion guided by the questions that you've asked throughout the presentation. So just scan that QR code on the screen or go to slido.com and input the code in the top input window for pound AWP U1, and we will continue on. So we've got a practice question here for you, just as a little bit of housekeeping to ask our attendees and who and where you're from, as far as what type of a background, what type of a company it is that you come from. I see the answers coming in fast and quick, which I thank you for. So please feel free to keep answering those polls. I will keep them active as we go through. But right now, while you're all answering that question, I'm going to go to to introduce Mr. Eric Crivella. So Eric Crivella, for many of you, I'm sure needs no introduction. Eric Crivella and I have, over the last couple decades, the last decade for certain, traveled the world together, and we have brought some of the worst projects back to life and brought construction productivity into many different organizations with our visits. And so Eric and I go a long ways back, having been AWP evangelists for some time. Eric is a leading SME by all means within the industry. And as the chair of CII's AWP Community of Business Advancement, he has a great position within the industry to share with the community. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Eric and let him further the introduction and get started with the presentation. Once he's done his presentation, we will come back and start reviewing the questions. And I see there's some questions coming in already, which is awesome. That means you're eager to learn from today's guest, and keep those questions coming. That's great stuff. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to change presenter over to Mr. Crivella, and he now has control. He will share his screen shortly, and away we go. Mr. Crivella, it's all yours.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Robin. Morning, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. I Let me give a quick overview here. I wanted to say hello on the camera and then shut that off for the time being so I don't distract myself here. I'll actually leave it on. Robin, thank you for the nice introduction. As some of you may know me, I'm VP of Business Development and Sales at both ConstructX and WorkPacks. Both those are Jovian venture network of companies, right? So I've been involved with construction simulation, construction automation over the past 25 years, right? I was one of the co-founders of Common Point, and we developed, Ted Blackman had developed ConstructSim, but he and I had started up a company together, Reality Capture Technologies into Common Point, developed ConstructSim, OpSim and ConstructSim, one of the first AWP and work-face planning tools. And eventually we grew the business up and sold it off to Bentley Systems in 2008. I stuck around there for 14 years and then came back around and started working with ConstructX and WorkPacks in just last year, or last June, right? So developed some expertise along the way in terms of on this 4D, 5D virtual construction models, advanced work packaging, work-face planning. Been involved with CII for many, many years now, since probably early mid 2000s, if you will. So I've been the chair of the AWP Community of Business Advancement for the past couple, and a great group to get involved with. If you're not involved, you should get involved. You know, very much promote CII to anybody that'll listen. A number of good joint working groups and subcommittees, and a group of passionate people, right? I also, within CII, I participate in the CII Research Team 391 for artificial intelligence and machine learning for AWP, trying to come up with what use cases make the most sense. And AWP is ripe for being automated through AI and machine learning, which we'll talk about today. I'm a big advocate for programmatic AWP via digital threads. So you'll hear that as part of the presentation as we go along here. But let's, you know, as we should with every meeting, we're going to start with a safety topic, right? So diabetes, right? So diabetes, you know, is 7th leading cause of death in the US, but, you know, it would be far higher because a lot of people die from other symptoms or other causes that diabetes causes, so such as heart attacks, etc. So up to 37 million people have diabetes, 11% of the population, right? So, and the key part here is that there's a bunch of folks that are undiagnosed. Up to 8.5 million people don't even know that they have diabetes. And there's a bunch of folks that are pre-diabetes in terms of not knowing, you know, it's coming, but, you know, folks that are older than 18 years, but, you know, are showing sugar levels that are heading that way. So the moral of the safety topic, know your glucose and your A1C, right? So below 6.5, you know, in terms of your A1C is pretty good, right? You're above average. Below 6, below 5.7 A1C is really good numbers. So I myself am a diabetic, right? I have those patches that has the G6, the glucose monitors, right? And I would say that this has become a really important tool in which to understand exactly where you're at in terms of your glucose levels and to make better decisions. And I relate this back to capital projects, right? So our capital projects need a better real-time feedback in terms of where we're at to make better decisions, right? So if I know my sugar's high, I can eat less, etc. So, but this gives a feedback loop to tell you exactly what you need to do. So this has been really, really helpful for me, but it's also kind of a going digital type of example for us all, right? At least for me, in terms of being able to understand, okay, where am I at? Make better decisions, go take a walk, don't eat the candy bar type of thing. So do yourself a favor, check your glucose, check your A1C, and you know, keep an eye on your numbers, and you know, try to be proactive about it. And certainly if you get yourself into a situation where you do develop diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes, there's ways to really manage it by better monitoring it and very closely. So that's the safety topic. Know your glucose and your A1C. All right, so let's get in kind of the topic here is path of construction. But the overall premise here is, okay, 15% of all the project activities that we do are out of sequence. That leads to a 33% increase in the construction schedule and a 25% increase in the construction cost. So the research team at 334, right, in terms of preventing out of sequence construction activities and minimizing their impact, this research team framed things up and came up with the leading indicators and how to prevent this, right? So the overall problem is at least $290 billion a year in terms of out of sequence work. So this is one of the premise for AWP and getting better at doing advanced work packaging, and particularly getting good at the path of construction. So let's dive into it. So, in terms of on the path of construction side of it, it's an iterative process, right? So interactive planning directly supports the team to define, refine, and finalize the path of construction, right? So it's an iterative process. Early on, you're defining your path of construction at the area level. You're trying to figure out your contracts, and you're working through that in terms of defining your boundaries for your CWAs, right? And understanding what the overall project's going to look like in terms of but refining that a little bit. So in the first path of construction, you're just looking at the CWAs, your contracts, and starting to put it all together. And then as you start to get into the refinement of that, the POC number 2, right? You're starting to define, okay, I have these areas, I need to break it down into disciplines, and I need to look at the engineering. I need to look at the procurement across there. So you can think of a CWP as a cup, and that cup has to be filled up from EWPs, from the engineering side of it and the procurement side of it, right? And so getting down into more granular engineering work packages and procurement work packages. So at that POC number 2, you make sure that you're kind of defining those. And then you get into a point where you go further in terms of refining those and dipping those down into finalizing the path of construction as you get further along. To put it to the CII model in terms of the various stages, stage 1, stage 2, stage 1 being the feed process, the FEL 1, 2, and 3, and stage 2 being the detailed engineering, stage 3 going into the execution, and then there's actually a stage 4 as well in terms of systems turnover and energization, right? So looking at this from the path of construction events, so these ones that are in yellow here, in terms of looking at the path of construction number 1 and what you want to get out of that and when that occurs early in the FEL kind of 1 going into FEL 2's phase, right? And being able to frame things up along those lines into that FEL number 1 and getting the CWAs identified. The P&IDs get issued right at the POC number 2 side of it, right? So within the POC number 2, right, you define your CWPs and you start to get your real framework in terms of the overall planning process, right? And then you start having these discussions and the interactive planning sessions to bring everybody together. And then you refine that, right? So you have these sessions, the team goes away, they do their work, you come back and you refine it again, right? So automating and looking at the path of construction and getting successively more detailed and aligned amongst your stakeholders in terms of how the project's actually going to be executed, to the point when you get to past the POC 3, the path of construction, the 3rd event, and going into, okay, look, we have a 60% model review, right? We need to make sure everything's checked out. We have our CWPs very well defined, EWPs completely defined, procurement, looking at that whole process, right? And so by the time you get to the POC 4, hopefully you're at 90% and you're at a class 2 type of estimate, and you're getting ready to go out to the field. So we'll look at this in more detail as we go along, but it's an iterative process, right? So if you look at the POC number 1, a lot of the inputs here as well as the outputs defined here. The project execution plan, you're taking that in, you're looking at the plot plan, any of the startup dates, and you're doing that backwards planning effort, right? So What are all the systems I need to be in the major equipment, the long lead items, etc. Here you're at a level 1, going into a level 2 schedule and defining that, and any of the modularization strategy, starting to look at a little bit of the constructability, any of the major equipment lists, etc. Right? And so coming out of this, you want to make sure you have the CWAs and the strategy and the boundary plan, right? The initial construction sequence. I'm going to go west to east, and this is, and then start looking at all the strategy considerations and start that iteration process in terms of defining the work breakdown structure, the activity breakdown structure, right? And so getting that coded into it, right? And the contracting strategy and the contract quilt that you would go forward here. This is actually a great time to actually get a commitment to using AWP going forward as is, right? So POC 1, it's an iterative process, right? So you go 2, 3, 4, etc. So you need to involve a group of folks along these lines. It's iterative. It's not one and done, right? So you want to get to a point where you make sure that you have the right people in the room, right? Particularly working backwards from the operations and the commissioning side of it, and understanding the systems, the process systems, what needs to be started up first, the engineering side of it, construction, procurement, project controls, and the project management side of it, right? So taking into account all these things in terms of the startup plan, the path to engineering, the path to construction, as well as fabrication and procurement, taking all those into account and putting that into an AWP index, right? So a master index coming out of that. And then use this as an alignment tool, and to have the interactive planning sessions along these lines, everybody contributing to the path of construction and having alignment along those lines, right? So everybody's seen the sticky notes and the exercises in terms of having an interactive planning process, getting the right people in the room to have the POC workshops and get alignment, right? And start making those trade-offs in terms of what's going to be necessary in order to deliver. Here's the path, and then we might need to do things differently based off of long lead items, etc. This needs to occur, etc. Thinking that through in a big room type of environment in interactive planning sessions. Now, these sorts of sessions, they're not cheap, right? You're getting a bunch of people together. And, so you want to make sure that you go into these sessions well prepared, right? And the accordion type of model from our lean colleagues in terms of looking at these planning sessions, and doing the upfront work ahead of time, and then using an interactive tool, like as I was showing on the other page there. The sticky notes on the wall works for the pool planning sessions, but you have tools like vPlanner and other tools along those lines that make that into an electronic digitized process. And you have to assign people to do the work for this. And these are facilitated sessions, right? But you don't want to do a ton of, you want to go into these sessions, the interactive planning workshops, with prepared, right? You want to have the necessary technology, you want to have the roles defined, the team roles, and you want to have people prep their portion of it ahead of time, right? So once you do one, people go away, they continue on, it gets updated, but you bring it back together, right? So the accordion type of model, and updating things as you go along, and really having this as a way that you can define things, in terms of the deliverables here, and creating that master AWP index, the CWP release plan, and the EWP release plan, right? So getting all the stakeholders together to march that forward and setting up that cadence. But really, these are expensive people, so have the technology and the infrastructure in place in order to do that the right way, and make sure out of these workshops that you gain alignment. So much of this is team building, right? And addressing the sociology aspects of this, and really functioning in a way that people own it, and there's alignment between them in terms of who's going to do what when, both at a discipline level and then at the individuals, who's going to own these, right? So there's a number of team roles, create a RACI for it, right? In terms of who's going to do what on that, looking at it from the interactive planning sessions, who's going to get all the inputs the right way, create the master index, etc. So think this through in terms of who's doing what. Obviously the RACI gets much more detailed. There's a lot more people to add to it, but at bare minimum, the AWP manager, the project manager, engineering, procurement, the construction, the startup folks, project controls folks, scheduler, etc., and your BIM folks should be a part of this, right? So getting it down to the team roles and responsibilities, who's doing what during these meetings, really helps to make them much more efficient and useful going forward here. So if you look at the outputs here, and the iterative nature of this path of construction planning aspects, POC1, in terms of doing that in FEL 1 and 2, the class 5 estimate that comes early on, right, in terms of what you're getting out of that, the conceptual model, if you will. Where's the processes? How do we define what's the early process setup for the project? And then into the design basis, the class 4 estimate, right, where you're defining the project execution plan. You got the equipment, the line list, you're starting to sketch that out. You got the CWAs, and hopefully the CWP is coming into it as part of the POC number 2. And as you go into the POC number 3, right, you're heading towards a final investment decision, right? Better start having things finalized from the CWPs, the EWPs, the PWPs, and then getting down to the bills of quantity, right? And then having the 3D model up to snuff in terms of developing a virtual construction model, and based off of all the engineering data sources, and being able to look at it from the engineering work packages, making sure they're aligned with the path of construction, and having those construction readiness dates conversations in terms of negotiating, if you will, with our friends in engineering and procurement as to what's the T-minus dates in which things need to be ready to support the path of construction. And then as you go forward, you get down to the class 2, you're reiterating and rebaselining and really incorporating, making sure that you're linking together all the schedules here, particularly involving our friends in the commissioning, the completions, commissioning, and the startup aspects of that, and looking at it from the system perspective and making sure it's linked in with the system's completion schedule, right? And then you go to the field. Then you're at the kind of a production control level with the installation work packages, right? And setting up a constraint management process in a production environment, going out to the field, making sure that making ready all those work packages with the goal of making sure you have a 3 to 6 week look ahead of constraint-free work packages before they're released out to the field, right? So if you don't have that, you can almost predict that you're going to have schedule and cost overruns. But this is how we avoid a lot of those 33% schedule and 25% cost overruns, is getting more disciplined around the path of construction in these planning events related to that. So switching up a little bit here, so there's a way to automate the path of construction. All right, so I'm involved with the research team 391 within CII, and looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning in terms of tool sets in which, what are the use cases here that we should take up from an AWP perspective. And the stuff that's what I'm doing with WorkPacks is along the lines of expert systems, automated reasoning, constraint satisfaction, the stuff that's going on with computer vision, just barely getting into that. But the really focus in the promising area is machine learning, right? So there's a lot of different aspects to AI and machine learning for AWP, but this is a real focus area for the company, for WorkPacks, in terms of doing this, and doing this from a kind of a fundamental digital thread type of level. So there's some really interesting things along those lines. So let me catch up here for a second. All right, so what we're doing here is we're addressing kind of a fundamental gap in the industry. There's the integration and the processing of the data. There's not a really good framework in which to do that and to link all together these project IT systems and these vendor applications. A lot of these are siloed, right? So the idea is to integrate all this together and to keep it updated based off of, as things are revised as you go along, and to integrate all that together and to keep it up to date and to do as much automation as possible using machine learning and expert type of systems and constraint satisfaction in order to help automate this process of creating the path of construction and really, frankly, doing AWP, and do that through a digital threads type of environment, right? So there's a nice frame here in terms of on the AI and the machine learning. And the type of stuff that my company has done is largely, related to developing this WorkPacks software that is able to orchestrate and integrate and validate the data, and using these digital threads and this library of digital threads that we've developed over the years in order to really automate this process, right? So when you start looking at, okay, what's the idea here behind digital threads, and what is a digital thread? There's a bunch of things that can be said here in terms of on the digital thread side of it, right? So this is the spider diagram, right? So this is something that was developed, through CII. There was a research team that was, TC03, that had developed the digital threads for AWP, and not all the AWP, for a couple use cases, particularly related to materials on that side of it. But there was this TC03 effort, a research team, and then coming out of that, our friends at the owner at Shell, and a lot of other owners agreed during some of the CII meetings, hey, how do we get better at linking all this data together, and what are the data requirements for this? So a group within the AWP CBA, the AWP Data Requirements Group, joint working group, was created, and they developed a data requirements that build on top of these digital threads, right? And then WorkPacks has continued to develop this kind of AWP digital thread library, and we've developed a tool that really orchestrates and integrates and takes advantage of all this data and organizes that and does the change management on it based off of AWP workflows, right? So it connects the dots between these various project IT systems using defined workflows, right, and microservices. And it's actually a really cool type of tool. So I'll quickly show this example, right? So there's a way to automate this, and within WorkPacks we've automated the path of construction, and do that early on in terms of with minimal information. So pulling in the activity breakdown structure, the work breakdown structure, and the various inputs for the path of construction. Define your CWAs and your CWPs, and do that from a 2D plot plan, right? And then automate those plans and schedule inputs and do the logic there. And then do the boundaries in terms of looking at it in terms of CWA and CWP boundaries and demarcations there within that kind of a 2D plot plan type of environment, and visualize the path of construction, and then iterate on that, right? And keep it interactive, refine that path of construction, and keep validating it, constantly validating it. Early on, you're not doing that every single day or every week, it's every other week, but as you get further along, you're doing it more frequently. And the trick here is to automate that as much as possible. And so we have a tool set that's able to kind of help that process. And so this is a tool set that is our Delta tool that is being able to orchestrate the data and workflows in order to automate this process of creating initially creating the path of construction, and helping to develop your taking your CWAs, breaking those down, and creating the CWPs, the EWPs, and the PWPs, the procurement work packages. So getting you an initial breakdown of those, and then allow you to start refining that. So rough it out and then build it in and refine it as you go along. Right. So we have a set of wizards that are part of our path of construction planner, right, that really automates and defines the CWPs, the EWPs, the PWPs from the activity breakdown structure and the work breakdown structure. But it's a wizard type of process that you go through in order to get there. And it's pretty cool in terms of automating this process. When I first saw this, I was blown away at the level of automation that's possible, and not only possible now, but where it can go in the future in terms of automating this like Legos, right? So it's really kind of the future is very bright. And then to be able to do this and do this at the quantity level and look at the ROS dates, right, and the schedule, and link this in with the documents and the tags and the master tag registry. So it automates this process and goes through that, right? So being able to generate an AWP schedule, if you will, right, and then start playing with that, and we're looking at construction readiness dates, and then having the conversations with engineering and procurement and other stakeholders in terms of, okay, what are the T-minus dates here in terms of the readiness here in terms of looking at this, and having facilitating those discussions to make sure that there's alignment between engineering going into construction, right? So often we don't have the mapping of the engineering deliverables to the CWPs and good visibility over that. And a lot of times we're asking our friends in the engineering side of it to change, to add a bunch of attribution, to put a bunch of stuff into the model that technology can solve that problem, right? So our engineering friends are optimizing the way that they do engineering on a system basis, right? Construction is being able to be based on an area and discipline basis. So being able to automatically map that and that backwards planning effort directly into a virtual construction model and keep that up to date, that's the ticket, right? So that is, and being able to do that whole process and then publish that out and refine that and keep going with it, right? And doing that, starting with plot plans, right? And then the quantities associated with each CWA and CWP, getting down to that level and automating that whole process, and then getting down to all the bills of materials, and then start looking at it from the constraint management perspective, right? So it's a process to go through, and then also linking that in with the 4D, 5D, right? So and this looking at it from the readiness of the engineering and the procurement side of it, and having those discussions in terms of where you're at on the construction readiness dates. Right, so this is looking at it from a particular module of WorkPacks called EPC that has been previously reported, that was jointly developed with a major EPC to do this sort of kind of path of construction side of it, right? But very automated, interesting tool here. And then at the end of the day, you're producing various 4D type of schedule simulations and looking at it, the path of construction, reviewing it, refining that, and going through and automating that. Various tools can do the 4D aspect of it, all looking at it. This is looking at it from a kind of at a detail level, but you can get to a point where you can have all the quantities associated with that as well and look at that and make adjustments. So at a high level, this is kind of a where I see things going in terms of being able to automate the path of construction. We have a pretty cool tool set, and we have a really cool kind of a platform for AI and machine learning to do the data management. It's all about the data, right? So, and the revision management of that. So, on this basis, right? So engineering, as I mentioned earlier, engineering largely is, doesn't always see the benefit to doing AWP because it requires more work. It requires them to change the way that they're currently doing their engineering and base it more off the path of construction. But there's a technology solution here in order to automate that process of taking the CWAs and creating the CWPs, the EWPs, and the PWPs, and having that level of visibility and defining those boundaries within there. Right, so this is a cost savings example in terms of which, in one EPC that was working on a $10 billion TIC related project, estimated $75 million in order to attribute the model with CWAs and CWPs at this level. So about 0.75% of the TIC. That was able to be accomplished in like 2 days in terms of loading up the various engineering materials within the tool and automating that process, right? So there's a technology solution to get the benefits for engineering to be able to recognize the benefits and to automate the creation of the CWPs, the EWPs, and the procurement work packages, and then start working on the alignment of that. So there's a really good use case and business case for getting better at the path of construction and automating that process through various digital threads. So a couple key takeaways, right? Path of construction is iterative. It's not a one and done type of thing. You know, interactive planning can be very expensive. Take advantage of technology and prepare. Have all the different stakeholders that are going to be a part of that come in prepared for those meetings and be able to support that through a technology that keeps good notes and keeps that up to date. Develop your, a connected data environment as part of that, but also use this as a way to prepare, have the guys prepare beforehand. They come to those meetings, so you're making effective use of their time, right? Do the work off campus and then bring it in. So with any adoption of any processes or new best practices, I've found that it's 20% technology, it's 80% sociology. There's a lot to be gained in terms of the alignment of the people and the process through these interactive planning sessions, through the training and the education aspects of it, through the workshops to get alignment along these lines. The 20% technology is super critical, but understand that there's a lot of the lean concepts come through here in terms of on the big room, on the accountability, on the accordion, on the doing the last planner types of concepts as well in the production planning, right? But AWP makes the distinction in terms of having dedicated planners to do that sort of planning aspect, and that still holds true if you ask me, right? And the key here is to involve all the right stakeholders, get the right people in the room and communicating, particularly bring in commissioning. Make sure there's alignment between the commissioning and the overall construction schedule. Completions and the commissioning often get disconnected. Frankly, a lot of times the civil side of it is also comes up so quickly that we end up pre-mobilizing to the field too soon. And civil work ends up being a bit disconnected from the overall construction effort, right? So the civil folks need to be definitely a part of it, because if you get messed up coming out of the ground, you don't recover easily, right? And it's also important to involve the subcontractors. Very, very important. At the end of the day, it's all about the data. It's about the revision management. It's about the change management. It's about being able to validate bad data and try to make it into good data, integrating that data, automating it, and doing the orchestration of that in order to, around these digital threads, in order to really drive a level of visibility and predictability that is a step change from what we currently have, right? And again, technology enables engineering to benefit from AWP without having to change a whole lot, right? So do it for them, right? There's a technology solution for engineering to get benefit out of AWP without having to force them to change the way that they do their work processes. So that's a key area. And because we're here with AWPU, it's important. And on the sociology aspects, education is absolutely a leading indicator of success, right? The more that you can get everybody aligned on, hey, this is what the path of construction is, this is what AWP means for this project, and down to the role specific, all the better, right? So I'm a huge believer in programmatic AWP and the digital threads. Really, the digital threads being able to connect up things to the point where you can look at this and reuse those and have that so it's a repeatable, sustainable process. That's the ticket to scaling AWP, if you will, is through the digital threads and to be able to do the change management, the data management. So that's largely that's what I have for you. My favorite quote in relation to the path of construction occurred a couple years ago at the AWP conference in Houston. Our friends at Dow gave a presentation, right? And they talked through it, right? So they had a construction manager that early on was not a complete believer, but by the end of the project he was, right? And so they kind of they quoted their project manager on this project, which saw tremendous productivity improvement in both pipe and steel, et cetera. You know, they quoted this person as AWP facilitated the path of construction, right? The goods arrived when they needed it. The large equipment was delivered right when needed. The project followed the path of construction from the front end to startup, and it was a thing of beauty, right? So if you get the path of construction right, you're able to reiterate and it works out, it's a thing of beauty. So that with that, we'll open it up to questions, and I appreciate your time today.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Eric. If you'd make me presenter again.
Yep, let me do that. Robin, make presenter. Yes.
All right. While Eric's doing that, we've got lots of questions coming in, but feel free to continue to add questions to the roster, and we will jump in and start looking at some of these questions. So thanks very much, Eric, for that presentation. Now it's time to do the tough work, where we get to face the audience and deal with the questions that are coming in. Some really good questions. Again, I thank the audience for taking the time to type them in. And if you've got further questions, please use the Slido app to get there. Again, the link is on the left-hand side here that you're seeing. So just scan that QR code. It'll take you to the app so that you can actually log those. For this section, I'm going to turn on my cam so that it's not just Eric that we're looking at, but I'll volunteer myself as well. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So let's get started on some of these questions, Eric. So the very first question is a housekeeping question. Thank you, Anonymous, I guess, for asking it. But are these slides available for presentation or available after the presentation, Eric?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. So after the presentation, there will be correspondence to everyone who had signed up, not just to those that attended. In that correspondence will be a link to watch the video for our presentations today, including the Q&A, as well as a PDF of the deck that Eric shared with us. So very good. So thank you for that. So, okay. Not clear on cost side. Does it cost 0.75% of TIC to implement AWP, including the POC, in an automated manner? So there's a couple questions that came in. There's a couple others that are very similar to further explanation for your cost slide, Eric, for your 0.75% TIC. And there's another question here. Is that cost savings figured out against the TIC or just against ROI?
TIC, right? So that was an EPC on a very large project that basically said, look, back to the owner to say, look, it's going to cost you $75 million in order to go do this, right? To repopulate this for an AWP perspective and get the CWPs baked in there the right way with the EWPs. So instead of that, they were able to eliminate that cost. And instead of having the engineering do that level of effort, it was automated in a couple-day effort. So hopefully that answers the question.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Eric. What tools should be used during the POC for planning? So I'm assuming what software, what tools should you be prepared to utilize during delivery of an actual POC session or in POC planning in general?
You need some sort of POC tracker, right? You need something that's going to be able to do that pool planning effort with you and to track that effort, right? So there's a variety of tools out there, right? Both the V planner type of tools, pool planning type of tools, etc. You know, my company has WorkPacks. You know, there's 4D, 5D type of tools. There's a variety of different tools that can help along those lines. But to the extent that you can do it digitally is the trick, right? So rather than manual sticky notes that have to be translated, and then try to do something from there. Start off with an electronic tool along those lines. But there's a variety of different tools that can be used together. A V planner and a 4D type of tool, a V planner and a WorkPacks type of tool. So there's a variety of tools along those lines that can be used. But the point is to go through the exercise, right? And the more that you can take digital technology to do that, the more that you can capture in that and reuse and refine, right? So I would say it's important to have some level of the infrastructure in place.
Right. So what I heard in there is something to log the data that you're going to be capturing, a visual tool to be able to view the engineering models, those types of things, some type of schedule capture, a database or a AWP master index or some type of a spreadsheet to record it, or an automation tool such as WorkPacks, as you were talking before, or others in the industry to help drive that forward. So thanks, Eric. Next question: how does the WBS tie to the path of construction? Excellent question.
You need to break that down, right? So in terms of having the work breakdown structure tied into there, having your nomenclature the right way, having your going in there and setting this up so you can have your level of the activity breakdown structure, the work breakdown structure, all tied succinctly in there, and having the boundaries and looking at it from the CWA, and then having enough attribution that where you can tie that the disciplines and the attribution to help refine and create the CWPs. So Robin, you probably have a more succinct answer along those lines. I look at it from the automation perspective on the WBS and packing that in there. So it's setting up the initial setup, right?
Yeah, I think you did pretty well. The basis of the WBS structure is the work breakdown structure. For those that aren't familiar with the acronym, is really about how we break down the work. When you're utilizing an AWP methodology project, regardless of how you're planning your path of construction, if it's an AWP implemented project that you're planning the path of construction for, your WBS structure should reflect the breakdown structure of the work packages: CWA, CWP, EWPs tied to it, and ultimately IWPs. Not the IWPs in the schedule can be a controversial topic. We won't go there right now. But that WBS structure needs to be tied to your costing. It needs to be tied to how you break down the model. Before you get into a path of construction, if you don't understand the buckets, it's tough to fill them, right? So, okay, POC was always a big, expensive room. I assume they're referring to the amount of wage. When you think about a room of people there to plan from engineering, construction, procurement, all the above, and you add up the hourly cost, it's massively expensive, is what I assume they're referring to. Can we now more comfortably use online tools to limit costs? What's your thoughts there, Eric?
Yes and no. I think it's early on. I think you need some level of in person, right? You need the big room experience. You need to get the people in person and aligned. I think there's certain events that are better off done in person. You can do a lot of this online and remotely, but I would say from a team building perspective, from an alignment perspective, from being able to trust each other and really forming a relationship, the sociology aspects, the first two really should be in person, if you ask me, or at least some aspects of that. There's a lot that can be done remotely and offline, etc. But when I find it better to get together the people in person from a sociology perspective and the alignment, and to really hammer out those the trade-offs that one has to make, or collectively the production team, the product team, the project team has to make. Is those trade-offs are better off done in person, because remotely you get only so much attention paid to it, right? So people are off doing other things. They're not fully dedicated attention wise. But it's possible, and you can do it like that. The trick here is to do it for people, to do it for projects, and to automate that and make it those meetings more of a validation of what was the work that's been done, or here's what the refinement of that's been. Double check this and make sure that we all agree on this new sequence.
All right, excellent. So people are voting for the questions, which is excellent. I forgot to tell you that. Please feel free to vote for the questions. Very popular question right now, Eric, with 5 votes. How do you recommend to better evangelize a team as an effort in implementing AWP into a company which is new to it? So that sociology aspect of culture, how do you get that lined up and serviced and sold within an organization, Eric?
You have to win people over one by one, but training is that leading indicator of success. If you can actually get in front of the project director and the project manager and explain the benefits of AWP, and 9 times out of 10 they'll say, look, this is what we've always done. And that's true, but we're adding a level of discipline and rigor to that, right? And you're trying to get the project director to buy into, okay, I buy into this idea that we need at least a 3-week look ahead of constraint-free work packages out in the field, and to work backwards from there in terms of how to get that set up, right? So it's one of the tricks here is to evangelize this in a company or on a project level. It always, even within a given company, you have to get the owner on board. And you get the owner on board, you have a 2-day workshop where you train on here's what AWP means, and then here's what this implications are for the project. And then coming out of a 2-day type of high-level training session, workshops, then you write an AWP implementation plan, right? And that corresponds with certain value scenarios associated with that to create an ROI analysis. And then you align on, okay, this is the benefits. This is what we're going to do. This is the implementation plan. Here's what we're going to go do. And then to develop a core team, right? So a core AWP team, and to have it resourced, and get the owner to resource it in terms of, you need somebody that's going to be a construction manager that can kind of oversee the effort. You need somebody that's going to be a super user, and you need a data admin. It's that core team of 3 folks, typically at the owner level, that really set it up for success in the whole project team. But you need to do that and look at it programmatically. And typically you need somebody that has the vision from a construction perspective, and that has, had some the people that have had the bad experiences are typically the best ones that are willing to change and try something new, right? So evangelizing this, go find somebody that has done this already, but just not, and is interested and has the passion to really do it. Getting the right people in those 3 roles is the key to success, right? And getting the owner to resource it, but systematically providing the value scenarios, and this is how we're going to go do it, and really starting off with the process and the people aspects for the training and getting that laid out right.
Absolutely, 100% agree, Eric. Good job. So when does the decision to utilize AWP have to be made to be effective? What do I need to do to ensure that we give AWP a chance to be successful? I think that kind of dovetails into your last answer a touch, which is definitely socializing it, making sure budgets are in place, making sure that those champions are in place and have budget is probably one of the main things. But when does the decision need to be made, you figure, Eric?
The earlier the better. FEL3, great. If not, as soon thereafter as possible. You want to get the most bang for the buck out of it. Do this earlier rather than later. I mean, we've always said that there's a big difference between work phase planning and advanced work packaging. And it's not just starting early, but it's also doing it systematically. If you don't get the work breakdown structure, if you don't get these interactive planning sessions, if you don't get upfront good project planning and alignment there with the contracts and get things into the contracts and get the data requirements in there, you end up chasing your tail, and you continuously will run into, we'll get it right on the next project, and nobody ever does, right? So, you know, part of this is you have to bite the bullet and start whenever you can, right? But a lot of times if you start too late, you'll get the, we're just gonna do work phase planning. We're gonna give a kind of we're only gonna do a portion of this, right? So the sooner that you start there, you start in the process and you get a commitment to it, the better. So crawl, walk, run, but you know, to the point where you can do this upfront and actually show some early wins along the path of construction and automating the packaging effort, then it becomes a lot easier to sell because you're selling predictability. You're selling a level of visibility onto the project that the project management team hasn't had before, right? And so it takes a carrot and it takes some stick and it takes winning people over one by one. But you know, the earlier you start, the bigger the benefit out of it. I would say, well, we've had projects that have gone into detailed design and been, you know, 60% complete and then started. Yeah, you're going to get some benefit to it, and it's absolutely possible. There's a lot of good things that could come out of it. It just gets so much better when you start earlier.
And I would say I would remove the project aspect of it. I think is the big part of that. Creating a systematic implementation of AWP and a culture around AWP within an organization means that we just simply do it this way, meaning that we've got things in place before projects are even thought of to facilitate AWP. Tools are in place, people are in place. So when we start a project, we just plug and play rather than reinvent the wheel like we like to do so much in construction. I think, you know, it should be like Eric showed the example from Dow. That's simply how they do business now. Several other companies, several other majors, Shell, Exxon, Eastman, they're all on that same bandwagon where if you don't do AWP, you won't get contracts with them. And that's because it's a systematic approach. So when do you start? It's a continual thing. You're always doing it, is the way I look at it. So thanks for that, Eric. So next question, what is the balance point where projects are too small of TIC to justify the potential savings of implementing an AWP process?
I'd say for your first project, you want to do a decent sized project, but you know, this can be used on small cap work and shutdown turnaround type of work, right? So, you know, above 20 million, you know, is what some of the major owners, like, they break it down that. But I'll be honest, it really depends on what level of implementation you're at and what degree of capability you have. We have smaller chemical folks that have done this on $1 million, $2 million, and $5 million projects, but they're looking at it programmatically. So it's not just one or two. They have 15 of these small cap projects that they look at from a program deployment in a brownfield type of environment, right? And automating the packages. And so it comes down to, you know, okay, you know, looking at putting the right level of AWP onto a project. But there's no doubt that AWP can be applied across the board, small, medium, large, mega, giga projects, right? So really it's a matter of what infrastructure you set up in process as to how far you can take that down in terms of doing this with smaller cap projects.
Excellent. So Eric, we have quite a few more questions to go through. So I would cordially ask you if you're willing to do a little bit of overtime. If you give us possibly 15 minutes, but I think what we'll do right now, will that work for you, Eric?
Yeah.
Okay, so all those that may be having an immediate hard stop at the top of the hour, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping here, and then we'll come back to some overtime for the questions, because there's so many good questions in there. I want to make sure we do them justice. Those of you online within Slido, there is a survey. Please feel free to go in there and fill out the quick survey. It's like 2 questions and a, hey, who would you like to see as a guest on these sessions? But let's get to some save the dates, if you will, as well. Really cool thing that just happened just before this. We've been nailing down incredible people. And I wouldn't have had it any other way than to start with Eric. And of course, our next guest is an amazing gentleman, Jamie Giersbrecht. Sorry about that, Jamie. He's going to Gerbrecht, yes, like I haven't known you for 2 decades. I apologize for that. He's going to be talking about AWP and site safety in our next session on February 15th. That is a working date. It may vary a little bit, so stay tuned to the correspondence. But Jamie's going to be our next guest, and we are no end of flattered to have him as the next one to talk about AWP and safety, which is going to be a great topic. I want to take this opportunity to plug also, we are getting back into live presentation, and we have a star-studded group of people that are going to be training. Sean Pellegrino, no less than the chair of the original 272 methodology, retired from Chevron. Amazing gentleman. He's going to be presenting the AWP fundamentals. AWP for Engineering by Mark Lambert, an award-winning volunteer within CII, who's going to be presenting the AWP for Engineering. Workplace Planning Fundamentals, by Keith Hansen. Keith is formerly of Williams, also worked with several other organizations, presently working with PTEG. Amazing guy. He's going to take us through the workplace planning fundamentals. And then, of course, every third Wednesday is going to be the webinar, and we're moving from there. So let's get to the shameless plugs, because that's how we got to pay the bills. So thank you all. Again, we are going to come back and do some overtime for some questions in a bit of a subtle manner. This will be the formal end of the webinar. For the AWP University, there's a QR code for you to take you directly to our webpage, awp-u.com, pretty easy. And Eric's 2 businesses, WorkPacks and ConstructX, please feel free to scan those QR codes and go to the websites, and email Eric with as much spam as you can at his email address here, and mine as well. And of course, for all of you sticking with us, if you choose to go to the AWP University and take some training, because that's what we're all about, for joining us today, here's a cost coupon in the top corner, 10 off AWPU. We're going to give you 10% off any retail modules on our site. Please feel free to get in there and start your AWP journey. It starts now. All right, so let me back up and let's get back to the questions, because I feel sorry that I had to interrupt the flow, but we had to get through some of the housekeeping for those of you that had the hard stop, and for those of you who want to put in the overtime with us. Let's get back into those questions. So Eric, thank you for your overtime, sir, and let's jump back into it. How practical is it to involve subcontractors in developing a POC during FEL 1, 2, or 3?
Certainly in involving subcontractors in those in the early FEL portion of that is challenging for sure, right? But the trick here is to have some level of representation and developing your strategy related to contracts and your contract quilt during FEL 1 and 2 in particular, right? And then into 3, hopefully you're finalizing your contract quilt. It's important to identify that capability that you're going to need, and the subcontractors that you're planning on using, or at least the type that you want to involve in that, and try to get some representation as to those domain skill sets into the planning sessions early on in terms of PO, the first and the second path of construction.
Agreed. Yeah. So, I mean, if they're there, if they're on staff, they're early acceptance, then fine. But it's not necessarily in those early phases to include the contractor, but, because you're making large sweeping planning decisions, CWA identifications and such at that point. And as Eric said, it's more important to get that contract quilt in place than the contractor in the room at that point. That's more 3 or 4, PLC 3 or 4 type basis, right? But Eric, let's throw this out here. I know you're a technology-driven guy, and it's a big deal. We didn't lose you, did we, Eric? Your webcam kind of froze there for a sec.
No, I'm here. Can you see me?
All right, so changing up just a little bit. Any construction technology trends you think are coming in 2023 or beyond? Great question. Interesting.
Yeah, clearly AI, machine learning, big deal, right? So I think that those are key areas there. I think you're going to see the foundation of digital threads is going to facilitate digital transformations. So, the digital threads are what we use to create our digital twins, right? They become the basis to have a product-driven lifecycle data management, connect the dots between everything, and do the change management on that and carry that information into the operations and maintenance side of it. So huge, big trend along those lines in terms of automating the integration and the data validation and the flows along those lines. I think in terms of construction technology trends, clearly the visual aspects of it are a big part of it in terms of the level of predictability that one can get and to show that and to keep that up to date. But we're seeing a lot on the AI side of it. There's just in the computer vision, there's a number of companies that are now connecting the dots in terms of smart contracts and being able to verify, taking cameras out there and being able to verify, is it done, right? And then paying people, right? So this idea of creating a construction platform that has work broken down into work packages and then tying that into smart contracts and then being able to use AI and machine learning in order to validate what is done and to get people paid quicker, right? And to use blockchain to help facilitate that whole process. AWP and the blocking and tackling of work packaging, tying that eventually to payment and smart contracts is certainly the direction that things are heading.
Yeah, excellent. I think AI is going to be a big one. One thing that I'm really watching, and I mean, we've been watching it for a couple of years, and Eric, you and I kind of talked about it before the session started, which is 3D printing. We've been 3D printing in our living rooms, and large scale printing is becoming a thing. They're doing a lot of construction substrate type projects with concrete and others in 3D printing, and I think that's going to be something to watch, especially in a shortage labor market. What happens with that is going to be interesting, as well as a lot of the automated welding and those types of things. Some of that robotics that's typically been more manufacturing coming into our bespoke environment of industrial construction, I think is going to be really interesting to watch what's going to happen there.
I would also say on the technology trends that we're seeing, obviously the use of SaaS technologies. And I think owners and EPCs are growing more comfortable with using, the SaaS technologies and the being able to do this really truly from a web-based perspective. And not only in dedicated single tenant type of environments, but also multi-tenant type of environments. We're seeing a bit of a trend that some of the owners are coming to realize that, look, even a multi-tenant environment can be partitioned to the point where it's feasible to use and it's not a security risk where my data could be ripped off by somebody that's also on a similar server, but it's partitioned and our friends at Azure keep it secure enough where nobody's going to get it. So we're starting to see a little bit of a thawing of the owners and the EPCs willing to use multi-tenant type of cloud deployments.
And I think that segues from the cloud discussion into this next question very well. What's the main challenge associated with data? Is the data collection or is it data cleaning? I would say it's data cleaning, and it's all about aligning your digital threads. And Eric, digital threads, take it from there.
Yeah, it's taking bad data and making it good and linking it in with enough other data that allows you to automate the tagging and the linking to the documents and the master tag registry. And it's about getting to that level of the data collection. I don't want to poo-poo that's easy, because again, there's a sociology aspect of it. When you go into a project and you ask engineering to hand over the data, there's always a reluctance. And again, another reason to do the meetings in person in order to, you're not looking to make engineering look bad. You're looking to have an honest conversation and to facilitate take the high ground and do what's right by the project. But it really requires getting all the information from engineering and them feeling secure enough that to do right by the project to give you that level of visibility, right? So in different contract models, getting alignment there is not always easy. So I think you want to get to a point where you have a level of visibility over the engineering, and getting engineering to give that information can be challenging. But once you do and you win them over, and we're not asking for the data to beat you over the head with a club that, it's not properly attributed or it doesn't have this or that. It's just you're better off for figuring out where you have your holes in your data early on, as opposed to waiting till you get out into the field. So getting over that sociology hump of getting engineering to share the data is not always easy. And then the other part is the cleaning of the data, right? So it's traditionally it's all bad data, but he or she who controls the data on the project is king or queen, right? And it's all about the revision management.
So on the terms of data, how do you evaluate the integration between AWP and BIM? Where's BIM fit into the aspect here?
That's a good question. There's an AWP capabilities assessment document that's been developed within CII, and certainly ConstructX has had a hand in that, and as have many industry participants, and being able to rationalize, okay, the path of construction means this, right? And these value scenarios associated with it. And this is the technology, functional technology that you need to get out of it. So we have capability assessment type of tools along those lines in which to frame that up, and which technology to use and to pilot and to implement to derive certain value scenarios. So there's a way to go about that systematically, if you will.
Excellent. It's possible for a contractor implement AWP on a project that was not designed for this methodology.
Welcome to my world, right? So that's like the vast majority of these projects. Right. You're winning people over one by one. You're getting alignment. You're getting a core group of people together, and you're selecting an AWP tool, and you're marching forward. You're piloting it out. You're crawl, walk, run. Horizon 1, we're going to do this. We're only going to do so many disciplines. Horizon 2, we're going to take on more. We're going to expand it. So it's about really setting that up and biting off the right size chunks. It's difficult for a contractor to implement this. I will say this, it helps if you get the owner on board, or if the contractor is motivated, right? From an EP perspective, we've seen the benefit accrue to engineering and EP, where if they implement this on a lump sum turnkey project, right, and they're more efficient, their profit margin goes up, right? So we've seen projects where the EP profit margin after implementing AWP and automating this has gone up on lump sum turnkey contracts. The profit margin going into a double digit, which is unheard of in most engineering engagements, right? That's when you see things really happen here. But you need to, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I would say the more humorous anecdote to that is I'm not sure I've seen a project that was fully developed for AWP yet at this point. So all the metrics thus far have really been on projects not truly designed for it. There's a research community right now within CII, AWP for Engineering, great group to get involved with. They're doing a lot of really great things. That's going to help set the boundaries and the basis and the requirements for true delivery of AWP with engineering design for AWP. So we're even working on the research as to what design for AWP really actually means at this point, and it's a great group to get involved with. So with that, Eric, we're coming down to the last minute. So the question that I want to throw out is, Eric, what's going on with the CII AWP CBA? Tell us about your chair position there and how you want to invite people.
Yeah. Listen, we have February 1st meeting, first Wednesday of every month at 8 o'clock Central Houston time. We have the monthly meeting. The next one's on, we have Tom Morris from ExxonMobil presenting on AWP data requirements. And we're asking folks also to participate in the RT391 AI and machine learning survey. And so the CBA is, we have a group of joint working groups, and we have some folks working on AWP for engineering. We have a number of subcommittees that, some of are dormant, some of them are active, but get involved. If you want to get access to tools and you want to get access to some of the background, information and deployment related tools, maturity tools, ROI analysis tools, the data requirements, the digital threads. There's a concierge service. The CII has come up with a lot of stuff, right? So we're not we don't have everything that's AWP in a box, but that's the goal, right? And between what's going on with our friends within CII and framing this up collectively as a community, we're able to serve up AWP in a box. And so we're trying to get to a point where if you're a project director, here, take this and run with it, right? So that's the goal. Not quite there, but we have a great group of passionate people, and I would hope that you get involved with them.
All right, so with that, Eric, I'd like to thank you so much for being our first guest in this webinar series. We've got quite the star-studded future assignments coming. Jamie, thank you for dedicating yourself for the next version. That's going to be a great session on February 15th, working date. Look for the correspondence on it. All of you that have gone the long haul with us, still lots of people on that have gone the long haul and done the overtime into the questions. Thank you very much. Everybody's going to get the correspondence with links to watch the videos for this, to rewatch it, as well as the PDFs of Eric's presentation. And I thank you all for coming to the next one 1 month from now, third Wednesday of every month. We'll be visiting these where we sit down with very influential individuals within the AWP communities. Again, thank you, Mr. Crivella. Thank you, Eric. And to all of you, thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon.
Hey, thanks for sticking it out. Thank you. Have a good one.